I view the guitars as a curator within major movements, or if they belong to one artist, we'd call it an oeuvre, you know. But it's the first major movement, the second, the third major movement, and then the fact that they tend to actually be cyclical and they come back around and they refine every time we go through it. In musical sense, we see this. We see this with Jimi Hendrix, who we already mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Jimi Hendrix was before my time. When I grew up, I was interested in Stevie Ray Vaughan at a certain point, and my guitar tech said, "Oh man, he's just the white Hendrix." I said, "What do you mean?" Because to me, I fell in love with Stevie Ray, and when I went back and listened to Jimi Hendrix, honestly, he sounded like a sloppier version of Stevie Ray with bad tone. To me, right? I understand that's sacrilege, because my guitar tech heard Jimmy first, and then heard Stevie, right? But Stevie Ray Vaughan was the second coming of Jimi Hendrix, and he was more refined. He was a cleaner player. He wasn't more technically proficient than Jimi Hendrix was, and the equipment had evolved, so he sounded, of course, cleaner and more refined. And now we have the third coming of Jimi Hendrix, the second coming of Stevie Ray Vaughan. Do you know who it is?
The second coming of Stevie Ray Vaughan?
The third coming of Jimi Hendrix. I've seen his signature guitar hanging on the walls of this store.
No, I wouldn't.
It's all right. It's John Mayer.
Oh, of course, yeah.
As a matter of fact, if you hear John Mayer's trio stuff,
that's really Jimi Hendrix. Yeah,
it's really Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Well, I think a little bit of both.
Like Stevie Ray Vaughan, his voice in that stuff is, and he used to do Stevie Ray covers. He was a big fan, and of course, you can't have Stevie without Hendrix. So of course, you're hearing that also.
Yeah.
But
well, he was probably inspired by both.
Exactly, and John Mayer is so refined that it's almost I don't want to offend anyone, but almost the elevator version of Jimi Hendrix.
At least what he stood for, maybe.
Well, and his music is so produced, so technically proficient. He's really great. He's really great.
Yeah.
But it gets more refined every time he comes back around. So now, understand that in music. Now let's take that to the guitar.
Yeah.
Because the first major movement is the Stratocaster, the Telecaster, the 335, the Les Paul. We get it. Those instruments. The second major movement for me starts with Eddie Van Halen. A Dutch guy.
Yeah.
So, because Eddie started to take, what he liked about the Strat and what he liked about the Les Paul and take them apart and stick them together, and he wanted the tremolo to do more and it wouldn't do it, and so he gets a Kahler tremolo and puts that in, and then Floyd Rose comes around, and the super Strat period that happened in the late 70s, early 80s is really the second major movement of the guitar. It's distinctly different than the first, and they are trying to refine and improve upon what's happening in the first one.
Yeah.
They're more technically proficient than the first ones are, because they're standing on the shoulders of the first, right? Yeah. The third major movement, when all of those guitars sort of hyped up and hair got bigger and people played faster and cleaner, the singers sang higher, the drummers played more, in the second major movement. That's where the Steve Vais came in, and the Satrianis and Warren DeMartini, Randy Rhoads, all those guys. It gets so big and so refined eventually that people find it unbelievable and they reject it. And in came Kurt Cobain and Jerry Cantrell. We had Nirvana, we had Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilot, these guys. And they came in with guitars that were sort of the rejected bastard, shameful cousins of the first major movement.
Exactly,
The Jaguar, the Mustang, Jerry Cantrell didn't play an SG, he played the Guild, whatever they called that, not SG.
Yeah, the T-Bird, or no, that's different.
I don't know what they called it, but the point is Jerry Cantrell's guitar looked like an SG, but it was Guild's version of it. And so they played these rejection versions of the first major movement.
Yeah.
And what's interesting now is we are at this stage where you're probably selling a lot of offset guitars, because what's happened is those guys are now the guys who are 40 years old and 50 years old, and they're buying a Porsche and they're buying the guitars that inspired them when they were young in the 90s, in the early 90s. And so we're seeing in the boutique guitar world also a refinement, because those guitars didn't function very well. They were also failures the first time around.
Yeah.
They didn't sell very well for Fender, and so they were taken out of production. Kurt Cobain's guitar, I think, came from a pawn shop or something, or somewhere, I'm sure. The point is, it was used, it wasn't a new one. But now, we are seeing the refinement of that. We're seeing the Stevie Ray Vaughan of the Jimi Hendrix, but the guitar itself. The guitar itself becomes more refined.
Yeah.
And those super Strats that we saw in the previous one are coming back now even more refined, They're headless. They're 7, they're 8 strings.
Yeah,
they're
okay,
all the Strandberg's guitars.
Yeah,
they're Julian Greeny's guitars. You know, it's their Ormsby guitars.
They're working from that movement.
They're working from that movement. They're refining it.
I had never looked at it that way.
Yeah, and so in the acoustic world, you'll see someone like a Taylor, you know, built upon Gibson and Martin designs, but as a repair tech, he was really focused on improvement and refining.
Yeah.
And so, the necks always need to be reset. Let's fix that.
Yeah.
There's the NT neck joint, you know, and this part doesn't work, so let's fix that. And the Taylor guitar is really this mechanical creation of trying to make sure a guitar doesn't defunk later on. He's refining. He's working towards perfection, you know. And so was Bill Collings and Santa Cruz and Hudson Dalton and all those guys that were small boutique guitar makers and now make hundreds or thousands of guitars.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's, you know, where we start to intersect. We meet with this. We've had Santa Cruz guitars on the tour. You know, we have Dingwall bassist who now makes a couple thousand instruments on the tour. You know, these guys are boutique builders who are making high volumes. Yeah. For me, they're still in the boutique world because they have an uncompromising vision.
Yeah.
They will make a guitar that has a lower price point because the mahogany is not figured or has less binding on it, no pearl or abalone, but they're not willing to make a compromise that actually decreases the vision of the guitar. So, you know, PRS was one of the first big boutique guitar companies, but they stepped out of the boutique market for me when they started to make the SE series. Yeah. Which is great. Now thousands and thousands of people can buy a PRS. They can have their dream. They can have the vision.
Yeah.
But we've now compromised the ideal guitar, and you've stepped out of the boutique industry for my show.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to disqualify them from the industry. I'm saying for my show. That's where the line is. The line is, I have an uncompromising vision. Yeah. So I don't care if you make 2,000 guitars, as long as they're an uncompromised guitar. But once you start to make the cheaper, then I'm not going to put it in the Duncan pickup. I'm going to put it in the Duncan designed pickup. You know, I'm not going to put in.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, the best tuners. I'm going to put on the cheaper tuner now to get to a lower price point. Those are all valid instruments. I played those when I was younger, of course, and we all need those in the world. But they're not a part of the boutique guitar showcase.
And what if production is outsourced to Japan or any other country?
Honestly, I don't really care about that. No, it's as long as the vision is kept. Yeah. I actually have some Japanese production guitars here from Steve Klein. Steve Klein is like the forefather of avant-garde design. He's been making guitars for over 50 years. But what happens is when you have an iconic guitar maker and they're in their 70s, is really the fact that their hands made it the most important thing? No. They worked on these guitars.
Depends on what you want.
For 2 years. And because Steve's uncompromising vision on them, he wouldn't let them produce something that was less quality than what he was going to do. He just needs the help of younger hands and such to make a guitar. And so I actually don't have a problem with that. It's keeping the vision.
Cool. Yeah, as long as the vision is consistent, it's okay.
Yeah.
Cool.